Welcome to 28storms.com. This is your cyclone update for Wednesday, the 28th of December. The U.S. Joint Typhoon Warning Center is currently monitoring three separate systems, the first being the remnants of Tropical Cyclone Grant, which has a high chance of redevelopment over the Gulf of Carpentaria. The second system is Tropical Cyclone Thane, which will be making landfall over southern India within the next 48 hours. And finally, we have a new tropical low over the southern Indian Ocean, but luckily this feature is not going to threaten any land masses in the short term. So as we start with the latest on the remnants of Tropical Cyclone Grant, the U.S. Joint Typhoon Warning Center has issued a tropical cyclone formation alert for much of the Gulf of Carpentaria, and the Australian Bureau of Meteorology has a tropical cyclone watch issued for much of the Cape York Peninsula. As we can see, by 10 a.m. on the 30th of December, they are expecting Grant to once again become a Category 1 cyclone before making landfall to the south of Weipa. The latest visible satellite animation of the top end and Gulf region shows that we are dealing with a very broad low-level surface circulation that is just now beginning to re-emerge over open waters, and although the convection is still lacking, we should begin to see an increase in organization and the storm activity within the next day or so. The latest low-level vorticity product also shows the vorticity max associated with the remnants of Grant beginning to move into the Gulf, and the wind shear values are relatively favorable, although that upper level ridge is beginning to get squeezed by this trough approaching from the south, so only marginal conditions exist for at least some development into more than likely just a Category 1 cyclone before a second landfall occurs. The following is the latest Australian water vapor imagery, and this best shows the approaching trough coming in from the south, and we already see some restriction of the poleward outflow channel, and the conditions are going to become steadily worse for this developing or redeveloping cyclone, and by the time the remnants of Grant reemerges over the Coral Sea, we will more than likely be witnessing an excess of 20 to 30 knots of vertical wind shear, so the timetable for redevelopment is very small, as only regeneration over the Gulf is expected, and then as it continues to move on off toward the east-southeast, it should once again degenerate below cyclone status. The latest model forecasts are coming up in just a moment, but I do want to go in depth with regards to Tropical Cyclone Thane. This is the latest forecast from the U.S. Joint Typhoon Warning Center, and they are forecasting a peak intensity of 65 knots within the next 12 hours. That would make this system an equivalent of a minimal Category 1 hurricane or a typhoon. Luckily, some weakening is expected just prior to landfall, but despite that, we still will run the risk of some localized flooding, along with sporadic power outages and minor wind damage to poorly constructed homes. Luckily, there is fairly good agreement between the Joint Typhoon Warning Center track and that of the India Meteorological Department. The latter is what we are currently viewing, and the forecast from the IMD does take the storm in the general path toward the city of Chennai, where 34 to 50 knot winds can be expected, and once again the possibility of flooding. As we turn to the latest visible satellite imagery, we can see that the storm is continuing to organize, and we are seeing faint indications of a developing eye-like feature within the central dense overcast, and the latest enhanced infrared reveals that some of the strongest convection is developing over and around the center of circulation. Furthermore, the latest microwave satellite imagery also reveals a developing eye-like feature, so this system very well could easily peak with a maximum intensity of 65 to 70 knots. Meanwhile, we can also make out the vorticity max associated with the tropical cyclone, and the latest wind shear analysis from the University of Wisconsin reveals that the favorable upper-level ridge that caused the development of this cyclone is continuing to spread westward into the Indian subcontinent. Therefore, we are dealing with upper-level winds generally lighter than 5 to 10 knots, which is favorable for continued intensification all the way until this storm begins to make landfall. On the flip side, we are still confident that some weakening will occur before the center crosses the coast. The first reason is sea surface temperatures. Although they are currently above 26 degrees Celsius along the southeast coast of India, they are only marginally favorable, and as we can see, if we go just toward the north, they are actually below the threshold for typical tropical cyclone development. And perhaps even more unfavorable for continued intensification beyond the 12-hour period is what we are currently observing on the precipitable water analysis. As we can see, there is quite a lot of moisture content embedded within the inner core of the cyclone at this time, but as we go deeper into the animation, there is more dry air beginning to wrap around the storm, and all of the bone dry air that we see on the water vapor over India is going to quickly begin to weaken the system as it approaches the coast. But just to reemphasize, despite the expected weakening right before landfall, interest near and in Chennai, India, along with surrounding areas, can still anticipate the risk of flooding, along with some very strong winds, with the possibility of power outages and some minor wind damage. So with all that in mind, this is the latest ECMWF model forecast, and as we go into the next 24 and 48 hours, Tropical Cyclone Thane has already made landfall across southeast India, and although the model was not showing much in the way of any significant redevelopment, the area of low pressure associated with the remnants of Grant are moving over the Cape York Peninsula, and then as we go into day 3, the system over southern India has weakened significantly below cyclone status, and then as we go into day 4, what is left of Cyclone Grant is moving into the Coral Sea, but without any significant redevelopment, and in fact as we go into day 7 and day 8, there's really nothing left of the system whatsoever. Additionally, this is a closer inspection of the 0Z run of the GFS model, and as we go into the next 24 to 48 hours, we see that the cyclone or remnants of Cyclone Grant are already pushing over the Cape York Peninsula, and the GFS is still alluding to a little bit more in the way of redevelopment over the Gulf. So again, Category 1 conditions can be expected over northern Queensland, and then as we go into the 72-hour time frame, what is left of Tropical Cyclone Thane is beginning to reemerge over the Arabian Sea, but we do not foresee favorable conditions for redevelopment with regards to that system. And then finally, as we go into days 4 and 5, what is left of Grant is pushing eastward, but not showing any signs of regeneration due to increasingly unfavorable winds aloft. So thank you for following, and please stick with 28storms.com/cyclone for more video updates pertaining to both of these tropical systems.